Welcome to Backstory and Beyond. I am humbly your host. My name is John Daniel, but I'm super honored to be here with Mr. Gotham Chopra, who is the founder of Religion in Sports. Sir, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I appreciate you so much. I just had the pleasure of listening to a presentation by Mr. Chopra, and it was off the chain. And as I was sharing with him as we were coming up here, the principles that he talked about, fearlessness, pounding on craft, becoming your best,
right,
looking at what it takes to be in your peak performance zone. These are the kind of things that he has pounded on as a filmmaker, as a person who's talked to some of the greatest athletes in the world and gained pearls of wisdom from it. I don't know where it's going to end up, but I'm sure enjoying the ride right now.
Thank you.
So, sir, thank you for coming in. And I tell you, honestly, this whole concept is based upon your backstory.
Sure.
If you take 90 seconds or so, just share a little bit about yourself and how you have come to be who you are today.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's thrilled to be here. So I'm a filmmaker, but my background, I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm first generation American, which means I'm the first in my family ever to be born outside of South Asia. My parents were immigrants, and I think growing up where I did, sports in particular became a language through which of assimilation. It's how I sort of integrated into the communities, predominantly Irish Catholic in Boston, where I went to school and the people I was around. And so I think for me, that love of sports, but then that observation of what does it mean to be great? How do you achieve greatness?
Yes, sir.
And that's from the athlete's point of view. Like how do you get into the zone and flow state and reach peak potential? But I also think there's being a fan. Being a fan, oftentimes is about joining something greater than yourself. Buying into something that you don't necessarily have control of.
Absolutely.
And yet you emotionally, mentally, even spiritually give yourself over to. So this has just been something that's sort of been a personal passion, but evolved into a professional passion over the last decade plus at this point. And, I'm surrounded by amazing people and collaborators and creators. So I'm having a lot of fun.
I love it. I'm a Philly boy. I know you're a Boston guy.
Yeah.
And I saw Dr. J and Charles Barkley play together. I know there's some people in your background that had a meaningful difference in the sports world.
Yeah.
Share a few stories about that. Just
well,
a few.
I mean, Kobe was a Philly guy. He was an Italian guy, then he became a Philly guy, then he became an LA guy. But, I know like that, playing in Lower Merion was like such a formative part. Despite being a huge Celtics fan and Boston guy, Allen Iverson is my favorite player, growing up. I mean, he was everyone's favorite player, it seems like. So, I have just had the privilege, probably starting with Kobe, of working with a lot of elite athletes. And, happened by happenstance or luck, I sat next to him at a charity event, struck it up with him. I mean, huge Celtics fan. Not only was Kobe, of course, a Laker great, but he was also a huge Lakers fan growing up. And so he and I were about the same age and kind of shared a lot of those stories together and had a real chemistry. And then, I think, I sort of learned to shoot my shot, like, as they say in sports, when, you have a chance and you take, what is the expression? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So
Absolutely.
I got lucky with Kobe and worked and collaborated with him. And then that sort of paid itself forward in the sense of like who he was and what we were able to create together. It, gave me a lot of capital to sort of go and credibility to go to the Tom Brady's. And, once you're sort of in that circle and you consistently deliver, I think you get that trust.
How did you form, and these are just words, you go where you want. What I love about you is you're down to earth.
Thank you.
And that's probably from Boston.
Yeah.
But that said, how did you develop the framework, the mission, the vision, the values, objectives of the religion of sport?
Well, I think, my father is Deepak Chopra. He is a very accomplished, some people would call him spiritualist, been in the sort of world of spirituality, the new age, self-help for many years. And, a lot of the things that he was talking about probably when I was young, that exist in wisdom traditions. You go on pilgrimages, cathedrals, faith, discipline, devotion, these exist in sports. If you're a sports fan, you know. I mean, I grew up in Boston, so I for sure knew what it was like to be part of a cursed mythology. I was a Red Sox fan. I was a Patriots fan. And yet, I was a true believer. I went to Fenway Park. It's the cathedral in the middle of the city. You go on pilgrimages. So all of these things that were talked about in wisdom traditions for me existed in sports. I know what it's like to be subject to something that you don't really have control over, but that you give yourself to. I mean, that is religion. And then, the great thing about religion is, the religion of sports is if you hang around long enough, you might actually witness a miracle. You don't have to believe in it. You just have to be present. And as a big Boston fan, I saw that with the Red Sox in 2004, the Patriots, who my whole life had been terrible. And then suddenly, this sort of this insurgent Tom Brady shows up in 2001, and it's deliverance. For the back half of my life has been nothing but greatness. Witnessing that. So for me, it's fun, but I think there is a sort of deeper meaning around sports.
Yes, sir. As you were speaking, I thought about the concept of mindfulness. In terms of an athlete being in that zone of peak performance. But it relates so much in this day and age where media bites are what many of our children are absorbing rather than wisdom.
Yeah.
And the painstaking that you have to go through to get your breakthrough.
Yeah.
Certainly, all of the folks you talk about, and I'll just name one and you can share your thoughts on it. I'm a lover of tennis. And Serena and her sister Venus she broke through on so many different directions for, I'm going to be very specific, the African-American community.
For sure. Yeah.
And, I know that you have spent time with her, and something that came forward in things I heard you say today had to do with her perseverance.
Yeah.
And what's her superpower?
Yeah. So first of all, I've had the privilege again of working with so many elite athletes, GOATs, as we like to call them. There's nobody goatier than Serena, right? 34 Grand Slam finals across 20 plus years, 23 victories, I think 14 doubles victories, 4 gold medals. The numbers are staggering. And to your point, it wasn't just on the court. She was breaking barriers and doing things and carrying a burden that, really separated her and Venus, from everyone else. In a predominantly white sport, she and Venus really cracked through and changed the entire complexion of that sport. And so she's incredible. I did, when I started working with her, I asked her, what's the one thing, Serena? You only get to say one thing. I know it's probably a lot of things, but if you could only say one thing that really drove your success across all that time, what would it be? And she said, well, if it could only be one thing, I guess it would be I showed up and I did the work. I can't tell you how many times I didn't want to wake up and go out and hit balls. I also can't tell you how many times I didn't. She's just a special talent, and that willfulness, that stubbornness, that resilience. The greatest athletes in the history of really any sport usually fail more times than they succeed, right? You miss more shots than you take. Hall of Fame hitters hit 300, so that means 7 out of 10 times they're not even getting on base. But it's the ones that separate themselves are the ability to pick themselves up, and Serena did that over and over and over across her career. She's got many lives, many chapters across that 20 plus years. So she's really a special athlete, but a special person.
Actually, that's a really great jump off point to my next question. This concept of failure. In the martial arts world, we would say failure is a master teacher.
Yeah, of course.
How did any of the individuals you want to speak about,
Yeah.
could be Kobe, could be Serena, could be Simone Biles,
Yeah.
would be a perfect example.
Yeah.
How did they engage failure to become better?
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of the people you just listed, but, one of the things that Tom Brady, who I've gone close to and I've worked with many times, says, without 3 Super Bowl losses, one of which was, heartbreaking to the Eagles in 2018.
Why you got to rub that in, man?
Without the losses, I wouldn't have had the successes. Without the 3 losses, you don't get the 7 wins. And the greatest athletes, I think Michael Jordan has a quote about how many times he failed. We think of him as the greatest of all times and all, never lost in the NBA finals. But in his mind, he thinks of all the missed shots he missed, all the times that he didn't get it right. Well, what did he learn from it? And how did he integrate that into his process? And Steph Curry's like that. Simone on the most public stage in Tokyo in 2021, quote, failed. She couldn't sort of pull it off. She had to step away from the mat. Well, she sort of integrated that into her being, turned it around, and then cemented her status, in the more recent Paris Olympics in 2024.
It brings me to the topic of this faith, which I know that you've talked about with Steph Curry.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about you now.
Yeah.
And what happened when you started covering wars.
Yeah.
There was a reason you went to that space,
Yeah.
having to do with faith.
Yeah, I was lucky when I was young. I got a job at a place called Channel One that was a news network. And I think, in large part I was hired because I was my father's son. And there was this concept of spiritualizing the news and telling inspiring stories. And I think it was like youthful defiance. I just didn't want to sort of do that. I didn't want to, necessarily just meet the expectations of others. I wanted to sort of find my own path. So I decided early on to push for what I thought was like the opposite of, the spiritual thing. Well, I'm going to go into conflict areas and war zones. And so I did. I mean, I think the irony is you go to those parts of the world where people are really like reduced down to the basics and they kind of oddly spiritual, like people are, driven by passion. People are in the moment because you can't survive any other way. And what I started to observe there too is like, aside from the anger and the rage, one of the things that was a tool that people used to communicate with each other to cut through all of that stuff was sports. Back then, wherever I went, people wanted to say, hey, did you ever see Michael Jordan play? Did you ever get a chance to watch the Bad Boys? Who's better, Allen Iverson or Kobe Bryant? Have you ever been able to see David Beckham kick a soccer ball? Like, these were the things that people all around the world just, dreamed about. And, that sort of stuck out in my mind as, sports as a unifier, sports as a common language.
I love it. I love it. As you were closing today at the National Association of Broadcasters show conference in Las Vegas, in your presentation, you did a meditation that I think resounded with everybody. But I want to just grab a piece of that.
Sure.
And that was, and I'm paraphrasing.
Sure.
There were 2 things in mind you had in terms of becoming our best. One was, who are you today? An assessment of that.
Sure.
And who do you want to become? But
Yeah.
you brought some issues that are necessary to get to who you want to become.
Yeah.
Like purpose.
Yeah.
Why are you here? But here's the one that got me. And I want you to elaborate on it.
Sure.
Learning to serve.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's something that, I grew up with, and it's one of the principles that my parents taught me early on, which is how can I be of service to the world? And, I think the thing is that most people have observed this in their own life, how good it feels to give,
Yes.
how affirming it feels to be of service to someone else, to help lift someone else. And so, there's even a sort of selfishness to it, because I think anybody who's done it gets a lot out of it. And I think, especially in the times that we're living in, especially in the noisy environment that we're all existing in, being able to find that silence, observe who we are, what do we want, what is my purpose, but how is it going to service the world? I think these are all really principles that we owe each other. The only way is through is the expression. And so I think, but the only way is through together. You know, either we all survive or we all don't. That's my opinion. And so I think that, you know, how can I be of service to the world is something that I think about every single day.
As we come to a close, because I know you got to get on a plane, you're busy doing great things for a lot of people, and we love it, man. You make us proud. I have 3 more questions.
Sure.
I'm going to say them to you so that you have a chance to think about them. Not that you need too much of that.
Sure.
But I want to see where your family fits in all of your success. If there's anything that we haven't talked about that you think really is critical to talk about, I really want to go there. And then finally, what's next for you?
Yeah. So, you know, my family plays a big part of, you know, of my life. Something that's sort of very personal. You know, I live in Los Angeles, and over the last few months, you know, I live in the Palisades. So there's, you know, these fires. So our house fortunately survived, but, you know, we can't live in that neighborhood. We have moved in with my sister. We live in the guest house. And, you know, like that, having a family, a strong bond, you know, my kids, her kids, it's been really special time in my life. And I try to look at like, oh, like I wouldn't have had this opportunity had this horrible thing not happened. So, you know, always trying to have some sort of perspective also. But yeah, my family is incredibly important to me. I have a 17-year-old son. You know, my wife and I have been together since we were in college. We're college sweethearts. So we have a tight-knit family, and my sister and her kids. But it's a big part of my life, you know, like part of the reason I'm rushing out of here is to get back to my son's lacrosse game this afternoon.
Yes, sir.
And so, you know, I think, and I believe obviously in the power of sports and what those activities mean. So I think that's really important to me. And, you know, in terms of what's next, I mean, I'm always working on fun projects. You know, I'm working with Steph Curry on a new project. I'm working with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon on something around Boston and what it means to be Boston and a sports fan. So, you know, I work a lot now with UFC and Dana White on a bunch of projects. So, you know, the market is changing, the industry is changing, and there's a lot of consolidation and transformation. But I believe while always staying up to date on what's happening and, you know, what are the data and analytics around the industry, I also believe in the power of storytelling. And, you know, the ultimate algorithm we like to say in our company is the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, and like tell a great story and it will find an audience. So that's what I'm committed to.
I love it, sir. And I think that final point is so powerful, and it resounds with me because I had 2 parents with a total of 4 years of education, born in 1897 and 1913. And the storytelling at the kitchen table is what made the difference in 13 kids.
Wow.
You went to Columbia. I happen to have an honor to go to Cornell.
Awesome.
I think the key now is how do we take what you're sharing, the head, the heart, the hands, and the habits to become better. Yeah. And I thank you for your time,
thank
sir.
You for having me.
Blessings to you and your family.
Appreciate it.
Travel with Godspeed.
Okay.